Welcome, ladies, to the Real Estate InvestHER Show, providing inspiration, strategies, and insight to empower women investors to live balanced and financially free lives. Now, here are your co-hosts, Liz and Andressa.
In today's episode, I have Vivian Yip. We're going to talk about how she was able to rehab over 25 properties. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, and all the lessons she learned. Now, so why is she now building a midterm rental? What is she really anticipating in the market? Welcome back to the Real Estate InvestHER Show. My name is Andressa and I'm running the show on my own today. My business partner, Liz, is probably having some margaritas somewhere around the world while I'm here. No, but I'm telling you something. You're going to have a treat today. I have Vivian Yip with us. Thank you so much for being on our show, Vivian.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So for all of you that are listening, grab your tea, your coffee for the next 30 minutes. You're going, oh, you have yours. Vivian has hers, and I have my water here today. Sometimes I bring a cup and you don't know what I have inside. It might be whatever your imagination wants it to be. Anyway, we're going to be diving. Vivian has done an excellent job rehabbing over 25 properties and build a midterm rental business. We're going to really dive the next hour on how she was able to do that. But before we do that, Vivian, let me ask you a quick and deep question. What is the lesson that is taking you the longest to learn?
The lesson that's taking me the longest to learn. Wow, that's a hard one. Really just being a better communicator, I think. Sometimes, I have so much information stored in my head that, sometimes I mistakenly assume that someone knows exactly what I'm talking about. And I have to be really conscious of my mind and what I'm thinking and try to share those thoughts and ideas with people and just not have such high expectations of other people when I'm the one that probably hasn't done the best communication.
My gosh, Vivian, can we dive deep a little bit into that? Because I think that all the women that are listening, right? We are masters in figuring things out on our own,
Multitasking.
and then when it comes down to hiring people or dealing with contractors and all the internal and external team, because we work in such a high speed and we connect all the little boxes inside our brains, we assume that other people, it's obvious, isn't it? Right? So there's no need for me to connect the dots or explain. I suffer from the same syndrome, Vivian. So all the ladies out there, if you do that, take a sip. You're that. But I think that we don't talk enough about that. And I think that a lot of conflicts happen and a lot of resentment happen because people assume, well, I'm saying this. Do I really need to say why?
Or the obvious. But sometimes we forget that our experiences have shaped what we think or what we believe, and that's different from someone else's experience. So we just have to really not take that for granted.
It's not an easy task, ladies,
Mhm.
right? And I haven't mastered it. I think as I grow, as I manage a larger team, but that's what it comes down to. But we don't talk about any real estate. People talk about strategies, people talk about how to, but we don't talk about the basic fundamental about communication. And I think that can break it or make it. A rehab process, for example, you're doing a project, you did over 25 projects, right? Let's
Yeah.
talk about that piece when it comes down to communication. How your communication helped you achieve what you wanted? And when did your communication style or skill really oof, that could have been gone in a different way?
Yeah, well, let me first clarify. I didn't do it on my own. I am partnered with my husband on doing these flips. So, there's no way I could have done that all by myself. However, when you're in business with your spouse, communication can really make or break you. And it's really tough to always assume that he knows exactly what I'm thinking. But, aside from the marriage, I think it's also really important how you communicate with your contractors, because at the end of the day, if you haven't clearly drawn out or clearly expressed what you need, then, you can have mistakes that are really hard to unravel. So say, for instance, I have a great tile installer, for instance. I work with his wife and him, and his wife is perfectly, multilingual. She speaks English perfectly, but he, even though he's been in the country for a long time, he still struggles with some finer pieces of the English language. And one time, the tile was installed wrong, and I thought because he does this for a living that maybe he understood me, but I made the assumption that he did. And the lesson learned there is to really have clear visual guidance, on paper that says, this is exactly how I want it to be installed, or whatever it is. Right. So it's just, it, I cannot always believe that I'm the one that's right. I have to believe that I need to change the way that I'm doing things, because obviously there was a disconnect somewhere.
100%. I think the easiest route and what the most common route that we hear, well, they didn't do it right, or the contractor run with my money, or whatever that situation might be. And we encourage all the ladies inside our Facebook community and our meetups. Wait a minute, let's take a step back, right? If somebody stole your money, absolutely, it's not your fault. However, what part you take responsibility for it? Did you have a contract in place? Did you have a payment plan in place? Did you pay in advance? Right?
Right. Did you set expectations?
Right. So then we look inward to find what can we change. We cannot change everybody's behaviors or perceptions, but we can change what we do. So when it comes down to rehabbing this amount of properties, let's break down the good, the bad, the ugly, and all the in between. What do you think, Vivian, for you and your husband, it worked out? What are the things that you guys have done and put in place that allow you guys to rehab this amount of properties?
I think first and foremost is not trying to shop for contractors all the time.
Okay.
Some people shop for contractors on every single project. We have been so lucky through the pandemic and everything. We've been doing this for 5 years. And we were so lucky that through the pandemic, our contractors stayed with us by our side through and through. We didn't have any supply chain issues, no labor issues. And that's because we always, even though like we do have both multiple contractors that we use just to make sure that we're keeping it humble and we know that what we're getting is right. But we always made sure that we pay our contractors on time and that we stay on top of them to make sure that they are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and just making sure that we're staying loyal to them so they could also stay loyal to us. Right. So for instance, like our electrician, even if we're working on a new project or a project that he's not really put a lot of time and effort into, we would call him if we have a problem. He would always show up on time or just show up to help us because he knew that we were struggling with an issue. So really, that's a good lesson is, stay close to those that are meaningful and valuable to you. The second thing really is to make lists. I know it's so simple, but for me, I try to keep a list of orders of operations and making sure that I have those key failure points of where we failed in the past to make sure that we don't do it again. So case in point, when you're ripping out a bathroom, like on a house that already exists, right? We're flipping a house. You have a bathroom vanity that might be old, and maybe you want to turn it into a double vanity. And then you have lights that are right above it. And you have the electrician do all the electrical work once everything's torn out. And then you install the vanities, and then you realize that the lights don't match up with the sink. Right. And like, how do you prevent that to make sure that you don't do that again? So you don't have to call the electrician again. Right. So it's really just walking through your process and understanding after the end of the project is saying, okay, where did we go wrong? Of course, celebrate where you went right as well. But where did we go wrong and how do we fix that so we don't encounter the same problem again?
I love that debriefing because, ladies and all the allies that are listening, every single project we learn something new,
Yeah.
right? One time I remember I was during demolition, there was like hair coming out of the wall. And I was like, it was in South Philadelphia, right? Well known for mafia and things like that back in the day. I was like, there is a freaking body on the wall. That was my first thought process, right? But then I took a picture, sent it to my contractor. He's like, no. This is horsehair. I was like, what are you talking about? Back in the day, they used horsehair to with a little some sort of plaster or mix to really put on the wall. And that is super, super durable. So we actually did not rip any of that out because it's there for so long and it would take so much labor to really take that and put something else in place. So I was like, what the hell? Like, who's gonna think about this, right?
Never heard of that before.
I'd never heard of that before. And I was like, there was no book that you can learn those things, right? So as you're going through all the projects, you learn how the projects work and the dynamic, as you were saying, the loyalty, right?
Yeah.
I'm a super fan of that because if people understand that you respect them, that you would expect the job to be done, but they also expect to be paid on time.
Correct.
So for people that say, well, yeah, they did it, and then I am delaying my payment because of whatever reason, I don't think that's fair. Then you're asking for integrity, you're not giving the same back. And I that is just like, no. You mentioned about you doing business with your husband, right? And you're married 2 times, right? With the same
Yep.
thing. How did you guys divide the roles and what you guys had to pivot because certain things didn't work? Or you always work from out of bed?
Oh man, I think we've definitely gone through our trials and tribulations on this. When we first started 5 years ago, it was just kind of like, okay, we have this idea, let's tackle it. And then over time, I think we just kind of figured out, what each of our strengths are. So I'm much better behind the computer, doing the analysis, talking on the phone, doing design work. And he's much better with his hands and, thinking through the execution process. So, after the first 3 projects or so, we kind of realized that I have my strengths and he has his strengths and we each have our own weaknesses as well. So it just evolved into this relationship where we just stay in our lanes. Right. And that's really important because if he tries to design something and I'll just look at him like, stay in your lane, or if I'll come in with the idea and I'll walk into a property and be like, I think this and this and this, and he'll be like, I get that you have these ideas, but execution wise, it's not going to work. So we keep it, we keep each other pretty humble and make sure we stay in our lanes. That's really
That's great. In terms of the market, right? Because the past 5 years, what we have seen is not what we are seeing now in the market.
especially in Austin.
Right?
Yes.
How you're in the Austin market, and it's just crazy from when we say like crazy from interest rate perspective, people say, yeah, you guys never face the double digits and all that. But from different perspectives, when it comes down to market, right? What are the shifts that you guys are making in terms of demand, supply? How are you guys finding your deals nowadays?
Well, I will say that, the market shifted really, really fast here in Austin. And we were locked into 2 deals by late spring of last year. And unfortunately, even though we made what I thought was pretty aggressive assumptions, we ended up losing a lot of money on one property. And then we or made a little bit of money on another one, and then made a little bit of money on the third one. So even out, it still hurt a little bit. So we're kind of licking our wounds a little bit. I'm not afraid to say that. We're just going to fail forward here. So we're stepping out of flips just for momentarily, just to see, kind of watch what happens. There's a lot of things macroeconomically that are happening as well. So we're just doing a little bit of remodeling work right now.
And I think it's so important to say that because a lot of women are beating themselves up on it, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
am saying more no's than yeses. I'm not saying yeses at all, at all. I'm just like watching it and saying that does not make sense for you guys. And it takes the pressure about like, instead of like, I need to get a property under, I rather not. I rather not. For you guys, if you can break it down, like the top 3 lessons that you guys learned on those deals, and that's why you decided to take a break in the rehab and then pivot to another niche. What
Yeah.
would you say were the biggest lessons you guys learned on those projects?
I think just really just keep watching the market as things are happening. We were really, what I thought was fairly aggressive. When we bought those properties, one in particular, I knew that interest rates were going up. I knew that meant that supply was going to go up, but I didn't really consider how much supply would go up and how much interest rates would impact buying power. And then on top of that, how much it would depress the sales price of properties. So I think really the biggest lesson is just not being over aggressive. Even though I had made an assumption of 15% drop in the sales value, in the end, by the time we sold our property, it dropped 23%.
Wow.
It's huge, huge. Then just, worried about being tied into 2 other properties and cash flow. You gotta like, there's so many moving pieces that you gotta watch out for it and balance. And at the end of the day, I would say that if I had to do it all over again, I probably would have been more cautious and not purchase that property given what the market conditions were or what we saw the market conditions moving to, right? Like Wayne Gretzky says, always move where the puck is going. And if you see the puck going around a corner, you kind of have to see where that puck is going around the corner and see if you can anticipate what those changes are. And I feel like anticipation is one of my greatest skill sets, and I just didn't anticipate enough.
Listen, if we all could anticipate, right?
We would have a magic crystal ball.
Absolutely. We'll sell crystal balls across the country and in other countries. We all have the great intentions, and I do not know a single person that never lost money in real estate.
Correct.
Let me make a clarification. If you're listening and you never lost it's because you didn't play enough time or haven't taken risks in order to grow your business. What I would say is that you haven't lost yet.
Correct.
It's going to happen at some point, and we all need to embrace that and say, okay, what do I learn here? What would I have done different? And then detach. I think that something that we talk so much in our Facebook group community is the detachment of the property itself failed. Detach of the property of what I mean about myself. I still have the same value. I'm going to still continue growing my business. I didn't fail. The property itself failed, and that's it. But it's a process, right? That we go through. You guys have pivot and let's talk about the midterm rental, the business that you have developed. Tell me the reasons why that was an option that you believe it's doable considering all the marketing conditions and what's coming up and how you were adjusting.
Yeah. So one of my life goals is to really focus on building net worth. And one of the best ways to do that is through real estate. I mean, if you read every book out there, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Millionaire Next Door, Tax-Free Wealth, all those books focus on how much real estate can drive your net worth. We were acquiring properties at such a discount and then adding value to them. It only made sense for us to try and keep as many as we could, right? But given the market here in Austin, the permitting process for short-term rentals, the normal long-term rent has not caught up to the purchase price. All these things made it unreasonable to assume that we could turn these properties into long-term rentals. So the only way to do it was short-term rentals. But given that short-term rentals have all these permitting problems and they're actually not giving out any more permits anymore, then I thought, well, what if I did a 30-day stay? And this kind of happened accidentally because when I had one short-term rental in a town north of Austin called Round Rock in 2019, and I bought this distressed house for $185,000. That is unheard of right now. And I, renovated it, made it all pretty, threw some furniture in it, ran it as a short-term rental. And then this was in July of 2019. After 53 reviews, March of 2020 comes along and Airbnb starts canceling all these reservations. And I'm like starting to freak out a little bit because I have a mortgage to pay, right? At the end of the day, I have a mortgage to pay, but Airbnb has the audacity to cancel reservations on my behalf. And I thought, okay, I need to stop this business for a moment, think about what to do next. And I was like, maybe I'll try, 30-day stays. So I put it on the MLS, I put it on Furnish Finders, and lo and behold, I got a booking for 3 months from a family relocating from California. And they were building a new house and they needed somewhere to stay. And I was like, wow, that's perfect. I literally talked to them maybe once a month.
Isn't it so beautiful, though?
And then 2 weeks before they checked out, I got another 7-month booking from a construction team. Then I was like, I think I'm onto something, right? So I eventually quit my job. So I sold this house because the market was so hot, and I was like, I don't like this house that much anyway. So I'm going to sell it, free up some capital, see what this money can take me to next. And then I found a duplex, very distressed. It was torn up by rats and whatnot, but it literally was in the best location, best schools, 9 minutes from the Apple campus, 12 minutes to the Domain with, it's a big entertainment district. So I bought the duplex, renovated it. And I thought, if this 30-day stay thing works in Round Rock, why wouldn't it work in the city of Austin? So one side was still occupied by the long-term renter. And then the second side, I just renovated. I threw all the furniture in it from that house in Round Rock, literally almost no startup costs. And it's been booked constantly since June of 2020.
Wow.
So when the tenant next door moved out, I flipped that around, threw some furniture in there, and that's been constantly rented since August of last year. So now I have 6 midterm rentals and I continuously grow that. And it's just been a wonderful avenue for me to quit my job and, mostly replace my income. And, it lets me live full time as a real estate investor.
I love it because many times people see the detours as something that is holding them back, right? So, the permitting, Philadelphia, basically very similar, very difficult to do anything, honestly, right? So as you evolve as a real estate investor, as those detours come through, right?
Yeah. Every obstacle is an opportunity.
Uh, the upside
Okay.
down, right? You
Yeah.
might not see it, but I totally agree. And I think that we just need to believe that there is a better opportunity there. And this is a way for us to really get aligned to what we are supposed to be doing in life. Because
Absolutely.
who likes tenants and toilets, right? I don't, and property management companies don't like that as well. We like the cash flow. All investors talk about the cash flow, but all the work that happens behind the scene in order to get there. So midterm rental, based on what you see the market going, right? We talked about anticipation. Are you doing any type of anticipation regarding the midterm rental?
Absolutely. So in midterm rentals, you typically have several categories of travelers, right? You have those that are remodeling or renovating or building a new home. You have those that are digital nomads. You have your travel nurses. You have your corporate relocations. And then you have your insurance loss of use. Those are your big 5 categories. Now, travel nurses, I don't focus on because our market cannot support the kind of income that they can, or the type of rental revenue you can generate. In the state of Texas, travel nurses are some of the lowest paid in the nation. So most of their budgets come in between $1,200 to $1,600. That's not doable in this market. So it's very hard for travel nurses to find stuff here. And it's very hard for me to support travel nurses because my properties cost much more than that. In terms of the remodeling and relocation, I've had really good luck with those. The people that are digital nomads, I've only had a few sets of those, not super popular for me. Then there's corporations, right? Corporations, they do a lot of relocations, but given what's happening to the market, that really hasn't been a huge focus for me. So the thing that I'm really paying attention to right now is the loss of use. The loss of use insurance policies can be very lucrative because property values are so high over here. When they lose their home to flood or fire, their budgets are often quite high and they want, a home they can move into as opposed to spending their loss of use in a apartment or even in a hotel. So, what we do in our business is we focus on trying to match whole home rentals into these insurance contracts.
I love that. Where can we find them? You contact insurance companies, or is there a platform where you can be matched?
Yeah. So ALE Solutions is the largest home, insurance relocation housing provider. So you could just go on the alesolutions.com and you can submit your house there. But it's hit or miss whether or not you will get contacted because you can't forecast a flood or fire. So it's kind of like having the right property at the right place at the right time. And, it's kind of hit or miss, like I mentioned. But when you do land a contract, it's like a gold mine.
Absolutely. I love that you're talking about those 5 categories, because many times people think about midterm rental as nurses only.
Correct.
And then they look around what's going on and miss the opportunity, more opportunities. In Philadelphia, what we had was, I don't think it was called midterm rental at that time, but thinking about it, it was, right? Because grandparents came to visit the family in South Philly. South Philly properties are average 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a basement. And if you're lucky, you have a deck, and they are sited side by side, meaning there's not space, not
Yeah.
Austin,
Like
Texas.
row homes.
Row homes, side by side, tiny backyards, no grass
Yeah.
anywhere, right? So when the grandparents come, usually is a newborn or a first or second, usually the families that live there, 2 kids, right? They do not have a place in that house to stay, and they
Mhm.
want to stay for a longer period of time.
Yeah.
So I usually rented for grandparents.
Yeah.
And guess what? They didn't stay at my property during the day. It was magical. I was
Yeah.
like, this is the best thing ever, right? But as you grow, I think that people need to look and their descriptions, right? You need to make sure it's for the nurses. You talk about the noise, that there is noise or there isn't noise, and you look for those 5 categories. I love that very much, because then you're not just focusing on, okay, oh, I don't have nurses here. If you were just looking at that from that perspective, you say, well, that's not going to work here because nurses over here get paid so little. But there are other options. Really love this, the categories of
Yes.
midterm. Vivian, thank you so much for all the tips that you have given to us and sharing your journey in your rehabs. Where the ladies and the allies that are listening to us can find more information about you.
The best place to find me is on LinkedIn, and you can just find me under Vivian Yip.
Awesome. We're going to put all this information on our show notes. And also, we forgot to mention this, but before Liz kills me, so Vivian, she runs the investor meetup in Austin, right, Vivian?
Right. You can find us on meetup.com. as
I
well.
love that. How long you been running it, Vivian?
Since August of last year. And
Wow.
it's been so wonderful. Our community is just so great. We have a very healthy group that comes out. It's all women. The group chose to keep it that way. And it just feels so positive and we have these coffee breakout sessions. So we try to match dates with people so that they can have time to get to know one another. And it's really wonderful because we have apartment syndicators, we have new home builders, we have house flippers, we have, people that specialize in all different kinds of things, right? Short-term rentals, midterm rentals, obviously as well. So it's just a really great community to have resources because, there's one TED talk that I listened to. It's called Isolation is the Dream Killer. And it absolutely is. But when you're surrounded by people that know what you need and they all want to help. So I just love the investor community.
Thank you so much, Vivian, for all the hard work behind the scenes. Texas is one of our largest groups, so we might be having some things coming up in 2024 for Texas, ladies. So hang on to that. So before we get going here, I have three quick questions for you. It's our fabulous three questions. The first one is, what's the most transformational book you ever read?
Oh, I mean, it's so cliche, but Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right? I mean, when you read that book, you kind of realize that you have people like, I don't know, Donald Trump's probably a bad example, but you have someone as wealthy as Donald Trump. And then you have someone like me who's doing all right. But one thing we have in common is that we both have 24 hours. How you spend that 24 hours can dictate whether you become the rich dad or poor dad. And I think that it's so important to read that book to understand what the wealthy are doing so that they can be on the higher quality of life that most of us want. So that was definitely my transformational book.
Awesome. What's the most powerful routine that you do to create a financially free and balanced life, whatever balance means to you?
I think it's just discipline. I use my calendar like crazy because I believe that if it gets scheduled, it gets done. Right. So for me, I, wake up at 5:30 every morning. I go to the gym, I kill my workout, I take my kids to school, and then my calendar is just packed all day. And it gives me a ton of productivity, but at the same time, it also lets me control what I have and when I can take my breaks. So if I want to just leave for 12 days to go to Vietnam, like I'm doing in May,
Nice.
I just stack everything up before that, try to knock it out of the way, be as productive as I can. That way I can really enjoy my free time.
I love that. I think such a great point because people sometimes feel that they're like, oh, you're putting me in boxes if I have, a color code schedule or everything on my calendar. I think that's actually freedom because then I can totally, as you were saying, control my free time, my nothing time as I wish. I
Yeah.
love
And
that.
also on the flip side, it's I can dedicate my time to whoever I'm talking to and I can be compartmentalized and just focus on them.
I think that reduced so much stress. It's not even funny. That's another, we can talk about all of that in an entire new episode, Vivian. You might have to come back
Okay.
just so we can dissect that part. Last question. Which women, famous or not, has inspired you the most?
Probably going to be my mom. My mom she still is a powerhouse. She's 76. But growing up, she was a banker. And I just watched her soar her career from being a teller to a manager. And then towards the end of her career, she was a vice president at HSBC. And just watching her growth over time and just being this powerhouse, like she knew everybody and everyone in
Wow.
Vancouver, in Toronto, in the Chinese community. And it just, it gave me something to look forward to that I could hopefully one day be as strong and powerful as she is.
Oh, you are, honey. The apple does not fall far from the tree. What's her name?
Anna Yip.
I love to get the names so I can imagine that in my head. many of the women that come and share about their grandmothers and their moms. I just want to, because I imagine her the way, I don't know if she looks like how I imagined her, but just like powerful. And they're all powerful. And it's like, of course they are. Look at you, right? You come from a powerful woman. Absolutely. Vivian, thank you so much for being on our show. It was a pleasure having you.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed my time.
Thanks so much. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to receive updates on our next interviews, go to our website, therealestateinvestor.com. There, you can subscribe to our show, become part of our investor community, and get updates on upcoming episodes.
If you like our show, please share it with other women who would benefit. And don't forget to leave us a rating on iTunes. We'd really appreciate it. And as always, we encourage you to take one action as a result of today's show and put it into motion so you can live both a financially free and balanced life. Thanks for spending time with us.
Ciao.